You can walk into almost any major museum today and find them. The Egyptian, Roman, Mayan, and Chinese gods. These were deities that massive civilizations built their entire lives around. People lived for them, fought for them, and died for them. Today, they are entirely extinct. Thousands of localized gods have been abandoned to history. Yet, roughly 80% of the modern human population believes in just 7 major religions. Even more unusually, these surviving belief systems did not emerge randomly across the globe. You can trace the roots of all 7 directly back to just 2 specific corridors on Earth, the Middle East and the Indian subcontinent. This leaves us with a stark choice. Are these 2 specific patches of dirt uniquely blessed? Or did the humans living there face geographic and social pressures so severe that they were forced to invent an entirely new, unkillable kind of religion? To understand those pressures, we have to look back nearly 450,000 years. Deep in a Spanish cave system, archaeologists found a burial site where an early ancestor, Homo heidelbergensis, placed a single, perfectly unused quartz hand axe beside 28 bodies. Someone invested hours of labor to make a tool, only to deliberately leave it behind in the dark. It is the first physical evidence of a species giving an abstract story to death. But the ability to invent stories came with a serious bug in our biological software. The capacity to imagine what happens after death also gave us the capacity to imagine all the ways we might die tomorrow. It introduced existential dread. Modern psychology experiments show exactly how our brains handle this. When human subjects are intentionally made to feel helpless or out of control, and then shown a screen of random static, they literally start to hallucinate patterns. They see faces and shapes that aren't there. The brain attempts to regain control by connecting random events. Now drop that brain into an ancient jungle. A sudden storm hits, or a branch snaps in the dark. To a hyper-aware, fearful mind, these aren't random events. There is an agent behind them, an invisible spirit moving the leaves. This instinct to assign intent to nature formed the basis of animism. By giving chaos a name and a set of rules, the world suddenly felt manageable. For 400,000 years, animism worked perfectly, providing early human tribes with the psychological stability and social cooperation they needed to survive. About 10,000 years ago, 3 immense pressures converged. The last ice age ended and the climate stabilized. Megafauna, like the woolly mammoth, went extinct, and humans had already migrated to nearly every corner of the globe. Wandering was no longer an option. Humanity was naturally funneled into specific zones, like the Fertile Crescent and the Indus Valley, simply because those were the rare places where wild, calorie-dense crops like wheat and barley grew naturally. The shift to farming triggered an immediate, explosive consequence. Nomadic tribes of 50 suddenly found themselves packed into dense, permanent settlements of up to 8,000. This broke human biology. Anthropological research defines a threshold called Dunbar's limit. Based on neocortex size, the human brain can only maintain stable, trusting social relationships with about 150 people. Beyond that number, empathy fractures. The archaeological record from early cities like Çatalhöyük shows exactly what happens when you breach that limit. With the invention of food storage, inequality doubled. Trust collapsed. Out of 93 excavated skulls at one site, 25 showed deep fractures from blunt force trauma. Neighbors were killing neighbors. Agriculture had created a deadly trap. We had too many people to go back to foraging in the jungle, but living packed tightly with thousands of untrustworthy strangers was actively tearing early civilization apart. To solve this trust crisis, early humans didn't build town halls or courthouses. They built massive, coordinated religious centers like Göbekli Tepe. It took thousands of strangers working together to carve and raise these 20-ton pillars, united entirely by shared rituals. These ritual centers quickly evolved into the first administrative hubs. If you have thousands of people gathering, you have to feed them. The temples became industrial-scale food production and resource-sharing centers. This chart of symbols is an early cuneiform tablet. The invention of writing wasn't driven by a desire to record poetry or philosophy. It was engineered strictly to track temple resources. In fact, 85 to 90% of early tablets look exactly like this one from Uruk. It is essentially a 5,000-year-old HR spreadsheet, carefully recording exact allocations of beer and barley to laborers, managed entirely by the priest class. Because the priests managed the surplus, temples became the first banks, issuing loans of silver and grain. When disputes arose over land or theft, they became the first courts. Legal codes like Hammurabi's were explicitly written as decrees from the sun god. A divine entity was the only authority that thousands of strangers mutually feared and trusted. God was effectively instituted as the ultimate, unquestionable CEO. Religion functioned as the exact software patch humanity needed to bypass Dungar's limit, manage resources, and scale civilization without tearing itself apart. Both the Middle East and India deployed this same basic software to save their growing cities. But as their populations expanded, they coded their final systems in completely opposite directions. In the Middle East, as society grew more complex, the theology became highly centralized. Thousands of specialized local spirits were aggressively whittled down to one absolute God, yielding one sacred text and one strict path to truth. But if you travel 2,500 kilometers east to the Indus Valley, you find a completely different operating system running a highly advanced, massive society. Despite eventually holding millions of people, archaeologists studying the Indus civilization have found zero evidence of central temples or absolute kings dictating rules to the masses. Instead, they built a decentralized theology. At its core is the concept of Brahman, one infinite universe that fractalizes into millions of unique manifestations. This allowed every single village, river, and family to customize their own deity while still belonging to the same overarching structure. The two regions produced opposite solutions. The Middle Eastern code demanded absolute centralization to maintain order. The Indian code relied on infinite, adaptable decentralization to maintain harmony. Logic suggests two models this opposed couldn't both be right. One of them should have failed. Yet these are the only two frameworks that survived antiquity to claim 80% of the modern globe. They won because they optimized for different types of resilience. The centralized model became highly efficient at rapid expansion and conversion. The decentralized model became an unhackable, distributed network that absorbed and survived thousands of years of foreign invasions without ever breaking. The global religions of the 21st century represent the peak of cultural engineering, the most robust, battle-tested social operating systems ever devised by humanity. And the way these ancient codes dictate your behavior today is exactly what we will explore in Part 2.